7 o'clock. And I think Jess said she'd be joining us shortly. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. In attendance for the BOC is Ginny, Lynn, and Andy. We also have on for the board Renee, Nancy, and Alan and Shari. And for the senior staff, oh, Jess is here. Okay. We have Susan,
If you're asking senior
Janet,
staff, Sherry.
and Sherry.
Sherry's here too.
I'm here.
All right. Just remind everyone.
And Brian Barnhart is?
He's the IT.
Ah, okay.
He's our IT guy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Andy, isn't Andy also IT?
Yes.
Yes, but I don't think he's here.
No, I think they just do one.
Yeah, Brian's covering for tonight.
Yeah, that would be Drew Slavic, and
Right.
Drew and Brian they alternate.
Okay, and who is Sam Kasura?
He is the person in communications and marketing who streams the meetings. He's the video technician.
So the
Oh,
meeting's
okay.
being recorded.
He's
Right.
Mary Weeks.
Who's Mary? Okay. Thank you.
So is this meeting being recorded?
Yes, it is being
Okay.
recorded. Yes.
Thank you.
That was actually my next thing on, is to remind everyone, the meeting is going to be recorded. And, once again, as usual, please mute your mics unless you're going to speak. And, remember to please be courteous and say your name, when you go to speak. All right, approval of the agenda. I would like to say that I would like to talk about Janet's proposal for a special meeting after we kind of do the agendas. So we have time to talk about that. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I have a question.
Yes.
I would like to propose that this meeting go into closed session at 8 o'clock.
I second that.
Why specify a time? Why not just after the 8 o'clock
When the
at
BOC ends.
the
Now, I was gonna
latest?
say, it's the meeting of the BOC. Okay.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Why
And-
would we be
and-
going into closed session?
Okay, because several board members asked that we have a closed session before the meeting of the BOC to set the agendas for the next 3 months. And because that wasn't done, I think before there's any voting on certainly the next 3 agendas, we should have a closed session at 8 o'clock. And then if the BOC needs to return to finish up, there's no reason why that can't be done.
I'm asking, why does the session need to be closed? What are we talking about that would make it eligible to be a closed session?
Right.
Personnel issues.
Okay.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. The only thing on the agenda for tonight is the BOC in terms of that we would be doing from 7 to say 8 or whatever it takes. So are you saying we shouldn't even do that?
No, I'm saying that the BOC at 8 o'clock go into closed session.
But my point is, hopefully by then we will have finished all these agendas.
I don't believe that will be the case, Jenny.
Oh,
Right,
I didn't see any
Perhaps we
request.
should do closed session first.
right.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I, would really, Sherry, what's the subject of your closed session?
Personnel issues.
Right, but
Is Is that for the board or for the BOC?
How many
Yeah,
board
that's
members?
what I don't understand.
All right, do we have a quorum tonight? I got in a little late.
Yes.
So
Yes, we have a
many,
quorum.
Yes.
how many board members are there? Are there any
Eight.
board members who are not there?
Yes.
Dick.
Dick is not here, and Janet is not here.
And Milton is not here, although he's not a non-voting member.
Right.
Okay,
Oh.
Mike,
So part of my difficulty is we didn't tell anybody we were having a closed meeting,
Right.
and didn't invite the entire board.
Well, maybe we could send them a
I
message
believe-
and see if
I
they're
believe
available.
that the other two
Take the
board
two-
members that you mentioned will be coming into our session. That's why
And
I
it
asked
takes-
that it be at 8 o'clock.
It takes a 2/3 vote to suspend our rules.
Yeah, but we don't have a board meeting right now. We have a BOC meeting.
We can call a board meeting. We have a majority of board members.
Yeah,
Well, yes. So,
But then we can't give any public notice of the meeting.
Right.
I mean, I think that there's a Maryland HOA Act issue that I think is a little sticky with calling a last minute closed meeting with, you
Right.
know, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm particularly not knowing what the issue is.
I feel exactly the same way. We've had a lot of emails back and forth this week about a lot of different things. But, you know, we were,
There's Janet.
All right, Janet has just joined the meeting.
Yeah.
I think
Which
we
is why I
have,
suggest we have it first, so that we can just get it out of the way, get the, if anything results from it, we can deal with that.
My
And
concern,
if,
I think we should have a vote.
now there's no meeting. We don't have
Well,
a board meeting.
We want to have a board
People can
meeting.
vote
We
right
have asked
now,
you for a board meeting.
but-
And
We
you
can have a-
ignored
Jenny,
our
Lynn,
request
Jeff,
for a
and
board
Andy.
meeting.
we can have a board meeting with the majority of board members vote to have a meeting. We can have a meeting. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't violate rules,
Yeah,
but we have had board meetings without notifying anybody about anything outside of the 10 board members. So this is a personnel issue apparently, and if it needs to be dealt with, we need to look at it, and apparently, according to Shari, pretty rapidly. We can choose how to do it.
We
Andy,
have requested this
Andy, I have
and
a
we have been
question.
ignored.
Jenny? Yes, Jenny?
Andy, I have a question. I'm not clear in terms.
Jenny, can you speak up?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I said, here's my concern is whether we legally can do this without notice really concerns me. But two, at the end of this meeting, I know Andy intended to talk about a couple of the issues that might go a long way to trying to solve a lot of the emails that have been going around. It could be a process that maybe we all would have a say in, and maybe we'd agree or tweak it or something. But I'm just concerned that we can legally do this, quite frankly. We've got it, I guess we have Sherry on the line that could tell us. And that Dick isn't aware of it.
I believe Dick is aware of it. I also believe that we have had closed meetings without informing the public.
Yes.
Yeah, but we haven't informed the board. Normally, there is a requirement to let the board know in advance, even if it's a closed meeting.
Is that a legal requirement or a board policy?
My concern, folks, this is Sherry. I have no idea what this closed meeting would be about. I have not been privy to apparently whatever emails it is that you're talking about. But right now, you were convening a board operations committee meeting. You were not convening a board meeting. If your intention is to convene a closed board meeting, you at least need to give notice to all of the members of the board. And that apparently has not been done.
It has been
Where is-
done.
well, you know, the attempt to have a closed board meeting, and let me ask Andy this, why was a closed board meeting not scheduled for tonight?
Good question.
Because I never heard it.
Yes, you
I
did.
don't have any,
I don't think that that's true.
No,
I
that's
don't
not
have any
true.
email.
Okay,
I have a compromise to offer.
please.
I'm usually the last person to want to have closed meetings at all, and I'm usually the last person to want to not have notification. How about if we make it a closed work session and
Okay.
agree there won't be any votes, but we will discuss whatever the issues are that we need to discuss. There may be some future meetings that we decide that we would say we want to have that Andy could then schedule beyond that, but at least we'd air what's going on and then be able to get back to the BOC meeting.
That's a good idea.
I second that.
Well, let's do this after the BOC meeting. Because we're in the BOC meeting right now.
Well, you
It,
might have
it
to
Andy-
may
change,
impact what comes out of the
Exactly.
BOC meeting
right.
in terms of what's on the agendas, and it's sort of a catch-22, because how do we talk about what we'd like to see on the agendas if we don't
They're
have
already set.
the discussion first, right?
Wait a minute, you said the reason to close the meeting
No,
was personnel.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
agendas.
Well, it may
And
impact the
check my
agenda.
email. I do not
May-
have any request for a closed meeting, I'm sorry.
Oh,
All right, well then,
that's hard to
perhaps,
believe, Andy.
perhaps part of the problem is that the emails are not getting through to you. And I would like to go on the record tonight with saying that I have, in fact, tried to contact people on the board, and apparently my emails have not gone through, and we have discussed this before.
This
So
this issue?
the issue of emails not going through.
Okay, because I
So
haven't got-
Andy, if you have not received any requests, then that may be part of the issue. If those emails have gone through, then they just haven't been responded to.
I have not gotten any email or copied on an email asking for a closed meeting. I've gotten emails saying we want to meet, and I think Andy was going to address that at the end of the BOC as to maybe what would be a approach to that. So, but I haven't gotten any on closed meetings.
I'll agree. I will take Alan's suggestion. And I think if that's the only way of working this out, but you do realize that this is being recorded.
Right.
And then that will be your decision, Andy.
Well, I really
think,
wish
well-
somebody would have told me beforehand. So part of our difficulty is we probably need to call another, even if we're going to do a closed work session, because right now we have the recording and the IT and the senior staff all part of the meeting. That's what we kind of set up here.
Dick is here, by the way.
Right.
So we
And
have the
so-
entire board.
I
The
think
whole
we're going
board
to
is here.
have a different meeting if we want to even just have the board members.
I can set up a Zoom meeting easily for all of us.
My suggestion about breaking at 8 o'clock was for exactly that reason. To go into closed session, we have done this certainly on our village boards, to go into closed session, and then if you need to return to finish up whatever business for the BOC, then you can return. There's nothing in our rules that says that can't be done.
Sherry, would you agree with that? That there's nothing in our rules that says that that can't be done?
Well, as I said again, my only concern is that what you're in right now is a BOC meeting. So you're talking
Right.
about now having a closed board, whatever it is, work session meeting at 8 o'clock. But I don't know who's on the line right now. Have all the board members been made
Yes.
aware of this
Yes.
meeting?
They're all here.
Well, I
So
was not
every
aware of
board
it
member is
until
online?
the BOC meeting started. And I don't appreciate being blindsided with the expectation to stay on this meeting longer.
What if we,
So this is the first I've heard of this. If you guys have been discussing having a closed meeting, then I was not included in those discussions. And would have appreciated at least having a heads up that you intended for this meeting to go longer than it is scheduled for.
The request for a closed meeting went to Andy, and the expectation was that that would go out to the entire board. That's the way it's usually been done in the past.
yeah, I mean, I
And
agree.
when
I
was
do
that
send out
request made?
notices, but I didn't get any notice. Ginny,
Well, I'm I'm a little confused here. If we were to continue with the BOC meeting, and it sounds like some people want to stop at 8, we will have gone through several of these agendas. Yet, on the other hand, I'm hearing some people don't want us to do any of these agendas until we have the closed meeting. So there's a contradiction there. In addition to, can we legally do that? Now, I think what Andy's going to be proposing at the end of the meeting is a closed meeting, time specific, how to go about doing it, and and we would all have a say in what is on the agenda there to deal with all the issues that everybody's been raising. So he does have a possible solution that he wants to have a chance to offer you. But I am failing to see the connection to the BOC agenda things, which agendas can be changed. This is to get something going, but it can certainly be changed. So I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I'm on with
You know, the problem is that the board was supposed to be on hiatus through August. Our next meeting is September 10th. I don't believe that the issues that have been raised can wait until September 10th.
but we could
Okay.
So
schedule,
could we pick another date in
Right, we
between
could pick
now and
another
September 10th?
yeah, we could pick another date.
Yeah.
Those agendas are stipulating what the board is going to be doing in the future.
Mhm.
And that does not take into account what needs to be discussed prior to those dates.
Sherry, are you the only one that knows what needs to be discussed? I don't know what needs to be discussed. There are a lot of
I have,
I
let me
Nor
just
do
say,
I. So none of
and
this
let me
makes
just
sense.
say for a minute, I have sent a message to the board, well, thought it was to the board and to Andy, saying that I believe because of the situation at CA now, that we need to first meet as a board to have a conversation about where CA is going from here. What are our values and how will we get there? And if we are now planning the next 3 months, again, and then in September, we are supposed to begin the budget for the next year. How do we have that conversation about the budget when the board has not been given the opportunity it has requested over and over? And Andy, I know you've gotten those messages. How can you ignore those messages? Because I know Ginny has certainly seen them. She's the only one who called me about it. And she told me to call Andy, but frankly, I didn't because I'm very annoyed, as I know you can hear in my voice. If the board cannot talk about what our values are and where we are going, how can we talk about what the budget will be for next year?
Isn't this Janet's proposal that she put forward?
I know
That's
it's my
that's one of the
proposal,
pieces of
and I've been
that's,
putting it forward.
that's one of the pieces of content. There's also the process issue that includes a meeting with the village chairs that was held. There's
Yes.
a talking about, I mean, before we can get to our values, there's a how do we want to work together? What are our agreements about leadership and accountability
Right.
that needs to be, that I believe, that's my interpretation, I don't know for sure, but that's my interpretation of when Shari says personnel issues.
Well, let's
Why can't we just schedule a meeting between now and September 10th to
Yes.
discuss all those things?
I
And
would
as
suggest
part
that
of
what we
our
do is we
agenda for the
schedule-
BOC meeting,
Right, we scheduled a meeting between now and September.
right? Because don't we start when do we start the
In
budget
September.
conversation on the 10th?
On the 10th with,
Or is it on the-
parameters.
Discussion
don't-
on September 10th. We don't vote on September 10th.
Okay. So
All right.
I would think we could have that conversation before September
Yes.
10th and just and add it to our list of sessions here.
Right,
Could we not?
yes.
Or-
I can call
we're
to
all here now. How about doing it now?
Now,
Because it's inappropriate to do it now.
yeah,
I think it's a violation of the Maryland HOA Act, and I
It
don't
is
think
not.
it's good practice.
It's not.
It's not.
It's
Okay.
not,
okay,
okay?
This
It's not.
this is a committee meeting.
That is
Right.
correct.
This is
And we can
not-
have a closed board meeting or work session.
Could we do it before the Newtown zoning meeting on Thursday? For
Oh,
we
could.
could certainly do that.
That would be a
No,
great
because
idea,
we're
Janet.
very limited with time then. I don't want to be limited to a 45-minute meeting because we have to get off and do a 7 o'clock meeting. I want to do it when we don't have to rush through it so that Andy could say, okay, next, and then hang up. We got to go.
Well,
I don't want that. Let's do it so we've got time to talk about these issues
well,
that never get time to be talked about.
couldn't we have the meeting from 5 to 7 on Thursday?
You catering dinner for all of us?
Look,
Yeah, it's Meals on Wheels, Alan. Somebody's gonna bring them over.
Shari,
There are working people on this board.
yes,
And I think we have to pay attention to that. My idea about doing it tonight is that we keep pushing things off.
Yep.
And when you keep trying to push away things that are emotional and that need to be discussed, there is never a good result. And this has been a repeated process. I think it's to the advantage of the board to discuss it tonight, but why don't you call a vote?
let's do a closed work session. Shari, would you please send me the topic or give me a call? Give me a phone call or something.
Why can't the board vote on this? We're all here.
But it's not a board meeting. This is a
board
committee meeting.
Sorry. And, you know,
Who
we
are
always
the
do that.
voting members?
You
Who
don't have
are the voting members of the VOC tonight?
Right, it's Ginny, Lynn, Jess, and Andy.
Great. So we could propose that we go into a closed meeting, but I don't think any of us would want to make that motion or second it. We can, I guess, but I think we should approve the agenda as it is proposed and then discuss a closed meeting between now and September 10th, ideally between now and September 3rd.
Can I, Andy, I got a question?
Yes.
Of those board members at work. Is 5 o'clock too early to go 5 to 7 on Thursday, Thursday night?
Well, then it becomes 5 to 9, Jenny.
What? I'm sorry, what?
So I'm on conference calls 8 hours every day, and that adds 4 more hours of conference calls.
Right.
Which means I'm sitting in front of my computer for 12 hours, which is a very long period of time.
Okay.
Is tomorrow night anything where people could do that?
I have a village board meeting tomorrow night.
Okay.
Here, let me send out a doodle poll, okay? We'll propose a bunch of dates and
I realize
I'm fine with
is,
that.
this is unusual circumstances, but we're all here, folks.
Yep.
Let's include tonight on the doodle poll. Let's all respond that yes, tonight is available, and let's make it happen. I know it's not our
there's
usual
of us here
practice.
who don't know what's going on, and I would prefer that if we're gonna have a closed meeting, we at least send out the topic. I've done that every time we've had closed work sessions or closed meetings.
Not entirely true, but I get
So,
that that's our usual practice, what we want to see happen. Or we could just, rather than spending all this time talking about it, we could just do it, get it done, agree that we're not going to make any committed votes during this unusual, irregular session, and then whatever needs to be aired can be aired.
Well,
I would agree to there being no votes tonight, but airing what needs to be aired.
Well, my suggestion would be that we continue with the BOC meeting and that we can discuss it, because I think right now we have a motion on the table to approve the agenda for the BOC meeting that I don't know if it was seconded or not.
I intervened
got-
first and a motion was made for a closed meeting at 8 o'clock.
Okay, but
And
you're
you've
not a
got
voting
the
member
entire
of this
board
committee
here.
tonight.
Many of them saying they want to meet, they want to talk now. We could find out if that's
But
the
this is-
majority.
You're basically hijacking a committee meeting. I just think it's
Correct.
highly
That's
inappropriate.
correct.
And I think that the correct way to do this is to schedule a separate meeting when we have time, when we can know what we're discussing, and we can make sure that people are notified that there will be a closed meeting.
Jess, I think the concern here is that there was inappropriate behavior already that needs to be addressed. And so I think that's really the essence of this conversation is situations that have caused a lot of angst and were inappropriate. So
Okay, so are those situations going to change in the next 3 days? I don't think so. What's done is done. Why don't we discuss it in a proper format? I just don't think that this is appropriate, and I strongly disagree with it. This is my first BOC meeting, okay, and this is what I'm witnessing. A group of people trying to hijack a committee meeting to bring a grievance, apparently, against someone else here, a personnel issue. It's not appropriate. Let's set a closed meeting. Let's make it happen. You certainly should be able to have your say, but can we just get through the BOC meeting?
I think
You know,
one
I
of
don't want
the
to spend an extra 2 hours on here tonight. I like to know what my schedule is going to be, and I find it disrespectful that we would come on this meeting and someone would propose a surprise board meeting when I've had no notice of it, when I told my family that I would be done by 8:30 so we could continue to have our regular evening. This is, I think, outrageous and ridiculous. And, you know, I'm
I
tired of it.
understand your reaction to this, but one of the things that we have said over and over again about communication is that the board has been lacking in flexibility to respond to situations quickly.
Right.
So we can't be hamstrung by our own technical items. That's why I said 8 o'clock, so that you can get started on the BOC. I am not unmindful of that. I am also not unmindful that meeting dates have been changed in the past, and it has certainly impacted other board members. That's part of the problem as well, Jess. So
Well-
I know this represents a difficult situation for you. I am mindful of that.
Look, let's
Yeah.
go on with the BOC. Ginny?
Yeah, I was going to say, as based on what Sherry's saying, let's start the BOC, see how far we get, and then and stop for a discussion, which concerns me that it's going to be recorded if it's personnel, and then
We can stop the recording.
and then get back to the BOC. Although maybe we can finish the whole BOC. It's just very, very awkward. And we have staff here. I don't know what we're going to do in terms of the staff
Yep.
that's been
Let's-
hanging around.
Let's go ahead with the BOC meeting.
Okay. All right.
I re-second Jess's motion.
All right.
To continue
Yes.
with the
Approval of
agenda?
Agenda.
Well, yeah, I don't know who made the original motion to approve the
Ginny
agenda.
made the original motion and Lynn seconded. All those in favor? Ginny, Lynn, Jess, Andy. All right. All right, let's look at the first agenda for September 10th. You can see that basically it's parameters for the budget, discussion of a reserve fund, the village financials, an easement request, status on the 21 operating budget, any pre-filed state legislation, the development tracker, and the capital improvements. It's kind of, our usual. Is there a motion to approve that agenda?
Discussion?
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. I'll move to approve it and then I want discussion. Okay.
Sure. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, quick question on
Yep.
4E. The status report on fiscal year 2021 operating budget. I thought it would be more like the end of the month, Susan, when we would get the final. So is this workable? Can we get enough information at this board meeting?
Well, Ginny, this was one of the items we asked to put on all of the work session.
Right. So it's just an
And,
update on where we are.
It's just an update.
Yeah, okay, and then flip over, and I think we just want to change Thursday to Tuesday, September 22nd, no big deal. The next virtual Newtown Visioning and Planning Workshop, I believe that should be Tuesday, September 22nd.
Oh, okay.
Not a big deal.
All right. Anything else on that agenda?
Oh, Andy, just a
Yeah,
question.
Lynn? And
How
then
much
Char.
information will we have in advance of this meeting on the financials? It's very hard to digest things in the meeting when we get them at the meeting rather than prior to.
Right, 6 days in advance.
Okay.
You'll have the background. Right, Susan?
Yes, it'll be posted on Friday for items A, all the A and B items.
All right. Sorry, you had something, and then Renee?
Yes, so I'm glad, I mean, that's fine. I guess I'm a little bit interested in the status report. I know that you're going to be producing a first quarter report a couple weeks later, but at this time for the operating budget, we still haven't seen what I would consider adequate numbers on membership rates, and what was billed and what was received, who's on property or living on assessed property and who's off assessed property, and by different types of memberships. So if they're tennis, golf, gym, multiple gyms, whatever you want to call your and I think that needs to happen on that date.
Okay, so I don't know that I can break it down into that level of detail because I'm not sure that the billing is tracked that way, but I can provide what's been billed, the number of people, the revenue, and then we already have the first quarter, or I looked at them today. I want to finalize them, but the first quarter membership charts that are always in the report, I can provide those as well.
Okay. I think it's important we know who is a member that's on assessed property versus who are members that are off of assessed property. So who are we financing? If we're at the golf course, we're financing 50% off property, 50% on property. If we're on the tennis court, is it 75-25? If it's at the gym, is it 50-50? I think we need to know what our membership is made up of.
Okay, and you feel you need that for this discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we need to start tracking that. I think it needs to happen every month.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Sorry.
I noticed that the easement request is letter D.
Yes.
Can we please move that up and make that the first item? Because it does not go with all the other financial information.
Good point.
Good point.
Yeah.
I would also like to ask that A be moved below village financials and status report and capital projects, because all of that information will feed into any discussion of budget. Parameters I fear will not be possible for us to actually discuss because we will not actually have the prior discussion that we need to have unless we set aside a lot more time before the 10th. So I think it's somewhat unrealistic to have that there. 50 minutes will not get us where we need to go on September 10th, unless you're going to include that as an item in all of the agendas going forward. Was that your idea?
No, you have me, kind
Do
of
you
scratching
think
my head
that
on
you,
that.
do you think that the board is actually going to be able to come up with figures on September 10th?
No, it depends on what you talk about figures. When I hear the word here, parameters, I think what we're supposed to receive from staff and discuss is the estimate on what the annual charge is going to be. Any discussion we might have is probably not going to impact the annual charge. I mean, our discussion on that, how we spend it, yeah, but this is not how we spend it. It's basically how much money we're going to have, in staff's opinion. And it is only a discussion. And I think it is something that as the board, it is really important even before you start the fiscal year to figure out how much money it looks like we might have based on how things are looking right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think that information about abatements, and Susan has talked about that,
Right.
Is going to be extremely important because the figures that we have right now don't represent
Right.
what that's likely to be. Guidance on membership rates also, I think, is going to be premature because this year, above all other years, we're not going to have figures that may, we just don't know what those figures are going to represent or what the state may be doing as far as COVID is concerned. There are lots of other things there. So I would say discussion, perhaps, on membership rates, but I'd like to see that come out as a separate item. So give that a letter so that our membership rates discussion is not the same as the annual charge or the parameters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we can pull that out. That's
Yeah.
if you want.
And I do
Remember,
agree
this is
with
only
Sherry about,
This is only discussion. This is not making a decision.
Well, part of the problem is, for me, is the word guidance, because we're supposed to be the ones giving management guidance. And at this point, all they can tell us is, if we keep membership rates the same way, our best estimate is we're going to have X amount of dollars. But that begs the question of what's been talked about earlier, which is, what are our values? What do we want to have? Do we need more money to do that? Do we need less money to do that? And so just simply a number on what we've always done it backwards to my mind. We said, this is the pot of money, we're not budging on it, and then we build a budget to that. We ought to be saying, what are our needs? What are our values? What are our, if you will, wishes? And then building the charge and the amount we want to collect based on that.
All right, so we'll move that membership discussion into a numbered item. And remember, it is only discussion. Jess?
and just to sort of build on what Sherry said, which, if you can believe it, I believe I agree with Sherry and Alan on this one, that also, in addition to the easement request, the development tracker, we should probably just get those little things out of the way at the beginning and then move into the budget discussion just for ease and flow. So I would move up the development tracker as well.
All right, we can do that.
That's a
And
good
maybe
point.
even the legislation.
All right,
Maybe even the legislation as well, and before we start talking money.
right.
I think that's a good idea.
So what we'll do is we'll move the fiscal year budget discussion and the discussion on the parameters for the reserve fund to the end. And we'll do all the other stuff first.
Mhm.
The village financials, the easement, the status report, the pre-filed state legislation, development tracker, capital projects. How's that sound?
You may want to even throw in the chairman's remarks and the president's remarks.
No, those we can save after. Those are usually just written.
Okay.
All right, so with those changes, I'll take the vote. All those in favor of the agenda with those changes? And unanimous. All right. Let's go over to the next. Give me a minute here. So this is our meeting, our September meeting agenda.
September 24th.
September 24th. All right,
I'll move it just so we can get discussion going.
all right, is there a second?
Second.
Lynn, all right. Okay,
I have a question,
Yes.
Andy.
yes,
Um,
Jenny,
On F,
yes,
license agreement with Spin for e-scooters in the downtown and gateway areas.
Yep.
This says vote. So when are we going to see, what we need to see is question one, is it the 6 days before, or would we get that sooner? That's question one. Question two is, we don't normally vote on contracts, so I guess the question for me is, why are we voting on this contract? Now, I'm not saying we've given guidance, we've said how we all feel about it. We had almost an hour and a half discussion several months ago, and you and I have talked to Milton about making sure the board's informed before anything gets signed. So all of that has taken place, and to honor what the board, a majority of the board was saying. So this is just kind of a double check on what it is. But my question is more, why are we voting on this contract and yet other contracts, the Horse Center or other things, we don't vote on?
Well, and we haven't approved the policy either. We were going to do the policy first and then the agreement, and then it got switched.
Milton had asked to put this on, and so I don't know the full details. Susan, do you know anything about?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Okay.
I think certain board members wanted to approve it and felt that it should be approved by the board, is the impression I got.
Well,
But if we don't have an approved policy, how do we even think about approving a contract?
Well, that's what I thought,
Policies
but I
approved
think
again.
at a previous meeting, that's what the board decided, is they wanted to do the contract first and then do the policy.
Shari?
The question was the policy.
Yes, I was just going to say, the reason it was coming back to the board for vote is that it represents a change in policy. So if a policy is going to be changed, you've got to do the policy first and then the particulars. Now, the board wanted to see, because this was part of a negotiation, whether this met the criteria that the board had been talking about.
Right.
So that's what I think this is there for, but I think you're right, it's not really here for a vote. It's part of the, what may become a motion or a policy, if there's going to be a policy that the board adopts related to this licensing agreement. So the policy discussion is first. The presentation of the licensing agreement is by way of review by the board, not the vote.
So you want to move it to board discussion?
I think so. Dick, is that your understanding as well? I know you were going to.
Well, it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And we had wanted to look at the contract because we were being asked to change a policy, and we wanted to know what we were getting into by changing the policy. So I think we want to look at the new contract. And if we like it, we can change the policy so that the contract can be signed. We don't have to get into the contract itself. That's a staff function.
Should we be looking at a contract in an open board meeting?
Well,
That's
I
my
was going to say,
concern.
I think the agenda item should be the policy, which is how it was originally listed. If you remember, it was originally listed as a policy on e-scooters, and then there was a discussion about the license agreement, and board members had a lot of questions and wanted to sort of see and understand the license agreement before the policy decision was made. So the way I see this is that the license agreement is sort of a reference for us to use in making a decision about the policy, which I believe staff drafted a policy
Yes, they
for
did.
us to review. And we just need to look at it with the license agreement in hand. But yeah, I don't know that the license agreement should be out in public. I mean,
All right, then let's make it.
I don't know if it was before.
No, it wasn't. Let's make it policy for e-scooters, and we'll move it under board discussion 7C.
But are we going to see the contract before we discuss it?
Yes, we'd have to see it, or else there's no reason to discuss. But
Okay.
probably we'll see the contract through the normal document channels, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Can we change the language so that it does not say agreement, which I think is confusing?
We're just gonna say
Got it.
policy for e-scooters.
And-
Right, or license review with spin.
How about just policy for e-scooters?
Yeah,
And then-
yeah, that's vague.
And then whatever kind of falls under that.
Because it doesn't have to be spin in the future. It could be something.
Yeah.
And this is just a board policy. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think Jess's point is well made, that you need to look at what these negotiations have in them, and they may have to go back again.
Right.
So that's a very important distinction.
Correct. The reason I raised this is it looks like we would be doing this in a public meeting, and it's on the agenda for the time when we're voting. So we didn't even have it on the previous agenda as a discussion. And I was just raising, is this what we normally would do with contracts? And I'm not aware that the boards have done that. So I like the idea of moving it down as this discussion, as policy, but we get to see that contract privately, not publicly, in advance, so that we can raise if there's any concerns. And then at this meeting, we would discuss a policy. But I guess in terms of time sensitive, Sherry's on the line, or maybe Susan knows. Is there a time when we have to end this one way or the other, or we're going to have a problem?
Well, we're going to have a problem fairly soon, just because the county is going to start gearing up to allow the e-scooters on their path. And if we have a situation where CA is not yet on board, you're going to have a situation where people can't go through to get to certain destinations because there won't be any permissions in place yet for them to use the portions of the pathways that are CA's. So it's becoming more urgent just because we need to be able to coordinate all this.
Well, my question then is our drop dead date sort of September 24th when we should be adopting a policy, assuming everything's what we want?
I would say yes. This is dragged out for a really long time, and pretty much at this point, everybody's waiting on CA.
All right, so then, I'm not trying to monopolize this, but then it really, if it's under board discussion, we're not voting on it that night, and what I'm hearing is we should be voting on the policy that night. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If it's a board discussion, why not move the discussion to the work session earlier in September? Then we'd be in a position to vote in the meeting.
That's what I was trying to ask. Is it ready for September 10th under discussion, and then it would be a vote on the 24th. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea whether it's ready for the 10th.
Would, Sherry, would you know, or Susan?
Well, the policy was already drafted. My understanding is that we are still waiting on a response from SPIN that is supposed to be forthcoming very shortly. So it is likely that we will be in a position to discuss this on the 10th, but I can't yet guarantee it.
So we
If they
would,
don't respond, we can always discuss.
Well, I mean, what you can do,
I was gonna say, I'm willing to take that gamble.
and you can also do what you've done in past meetings, is you can have a discussion in the discussion section of the agenda, and then a vote in the vote portion of the agenda.
I don't
We've done
think that
that
gives
before.
people enough time to evaluate, and also if there are criteria that need to be added. The whole point of having the discussion is that it informs what would be going into policy. And if you say that policy has been written, do you mean CA, board policy has already been written?
No.
Drafted by staff.
Way back when this was initially presented to the board, we provided a draft of new language for CA's, essentially rules and regulations on use of the open space. That's the policy I'm talking about that the staff had drafted.
is
I
there,
will
a
also
board-
say that I'm
and the board
concerned about
has-
how much I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The board has already seen that at least once, and I think several times. But obviously, we'll provide it again for the agenda at which this is going to be discussed.
is there any problem with going back and amending the September 10th agenda to have under discussion this topic? And then it would make sense to have it on for a vote September 24th, perhaps, unless
I think the key there is whether or not the board can see the contract beforehand.
by September 10th. Well, if
Right.
it's on the agenda, then we can deal with it. If we don't see the contract, then we just don't deal with it. But it's already, people are on notice that it might be a subject. And when we get to it on the discussion thing, we'll say, we don't have enough information to discuss this, whatever. But at least we've covered it on the 10th, and then allowed ourselves to vote on the 24th.
Lynn, Jess, what do you think?
I agree with that. I would, if it's appropriate, I would make a motion that we amend the September 10th agenda to add a discussion on the e-scooter policy, and then on the 24th, we move that item. Well, it's in the right place, but it would be the e-scooter policy for us to vote on the 24th.
Yeah, I agree. It makes sense.
All right. Jenny, you agree?
Yeah, I suggest.
All right. All right.
Is a vote?
Yeah.
It is. Anything else?
And I think Sherry's point about getting the board to review what was suggested by staff, so that we can see if it matches criteria that have been negotiated with SPIN.
Yeah.
Or we can amend the suggestion by the staff. Remember that the staff just is suggesting. The board actually writes and agrees to the policy.
Yes.
So we can amend that based on what we see about what those negotiations yielded.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, if we're finished with these scooters, can I raise an issue number 9B? 9B. Report from the CA reps to the Inner Arbor Trust Board of Directors. I know it's only 5 minutes, but should we be considering a closed meeting on that issue at some point soon?
Well, this is just the standard,
Yeah, I know. I'm just,
Repeat.
we're not going to put that on the agenda, but I'm just saying in terms of, should we be thinking about that, guys? You don't have to answer. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
somewhere down the line we need a closed meeting,
Yeah, we'll have
definitely
it.
schedule a closed meeting.
Yeah, I think it depends on what happens. We're supposed to have an answer to the legislation. Well, we should have the end of this month, and then what are we doing going forward?
Okay, all right, I didn't want to get a long discussion
Yeah,
on it. Just,
That's not
okay.
it. All right, so we made the changes. It's gonna be, the policy for e-scooters in downtown and Gateway, and we'll discuss on the 10th. I don't hear any other changes. Is there, a vote on the approval of the agenda with that change?
So moved.
All right, looks like it's unanimous. All right. September 8th, October 8th. So I can bring this up.
So moved. I
Is there a
move for-
second?
I move for approval of the October 8th agenda.
Second.
Lynn, Ginny and Lynn. All right, let's see.
I noticed number F on there. Actually, number 4B, I think, is kind of an interesting thing and could be, I'd like to, definitely want to learn more about that, and I'm not sure I want to wait until October 8th. And F is mission and core values. I had marked next to it Shari, because I think that's your project, right?
Yes, it is Shari's project.
Yeah. So, that's all I had.
Do we have on any of these agendas an operational plan for CA?
An operational plan for CA. Can you just kind of give me a word or two on what you're thinking?
Okay, so an overall, I believe one of the other board members asked for this, about seeing an overall approach that will inform what happens. We have a status report on fiscal year 2021 operating budget.
Right.
It might be a good thing. This is our work session, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. At a work session to include a discussion on what the operations plan will be going forward, since we're still in the middle of the COVID situation. Decisions have been made without input from the board, because the board really hasn't asked for anything specific or objective. And so I think this might be a good time for us to kind of all pull up our socks, see where we are, see what the state of the state and the nation is, and take a look at an operations plan that would be both what our preferred plan would be and what our plan B might have to be.
Well,
We couldn't do this in the past because everything hit so fast. And I really, I appreciate all the work that the staff has done under very trying conditions. This would be a good time for us at this point to take a look back, to take and to try to at least take a look forward in terms of what have we learned, what can we put in there operationally, and get that down someplace where we're all in alignment around it.
Sherry, that's a really good point. And to go along with that point, I think that there needs to be a discussion by the board as to the financial structure of CA. I noticed on the September 24th agenda that there's a new reserve account, but I think we also need to take a look at what we want to see as far as the balance sheet structure. Do we want us to start repaying money to the insurance reserve? How comfortable are we with the repayment of the deferred payroll taxes from the spring? How much money do we want them to borrow under the line of credit? Because what happens if next year, fiscal year, whatever that would be, 2022, is worse than this year. I mean, if this drags out, where do we want to be structurally to survive the following year?
Well,
And I
that
think
also,
that needs to happen
sounds like
before
part
a
of
lot
the
of this. Pardon?
operational plan. And I
Well,
think
that,
part of it is also what Janet wants to talk about too, with her proposal.
Mhm.
So,
yes.
I wonder if just, and you guys know better than I do, being relatively new to the whole budget process, if it might make sense to sort of integrate that discussion into the budget planning. I know that what I am seeing in a lot of nonprofits, both my own and others that I work with, is that as we are doing our operating budgets, we are being asked by our boards to come up with sort of like a best case, likely case, and worst case scenario. And I think that's kind of in line with what Renee and Sherry are saying, is sort of, like the worst case scenario being, all the gyms are shut down and all this kind of stuff. And the best case being, so then we sort of have option A, B, and C. I know that, when I came on, you guys were sort of doing something like that. You had like everything open July, everything open September kind of budget. And so I think there might be, it might make sense to somehow integrate that into our budget planning, even if it's just, like you said, a plan A and a plan B. I know I know from experience, and I'm sure that my budget compared to this one is a joke, but to prepare sort of two budgets can be, challenging. But maybe the idea is sort of along the lines of what Sherry is saying, sort of like a big picture view, like, in the good case scenario, this is what can operate. And in the bad case scenario, this is what can operate. And so then we sort of know based on that what our costs would be and can build the budget, to a certain degree based on that. So just to sort of, confuse everything, I'm just wondering if some of that discussion might make sense to happen earlier.
Right. That's my point.
As best it can.
Right. And I think we have to also have, I agree absolutely with all the operational stuff, but we also have to sit down as a board and say, okay, we got away this year with collecting X number of dollars in assessments. The gyms are cash flowing or not cash flowing at a certain level. If this drags out a second year, which it might, or what do we have to do structurally to survive the second year? If we draw down our line, and then of course it will be repaid from our assessments, how much do we draw down? Okay, what do we want that balance to be on April 30th or May 31st or June 30th for the new assessments? How much free cash flow do we want? We need to start thinking bigger than just how much is golf going to cost us? How much is the gym going to cost? What is the financial structure that's going to get us through 2 years? That's hopefully the worst case scenario. And I think we have to start looking at that really seriously.
So I remind people that we actually have an entire evening set aside for the budget discussion, October 29th. So if you want to do the operations plan going forward and that type of discussion integrated in, we've got a whole evening set aside, and we can certainly put those topics in that agenda. Is that what?
I think that's a real possibility, but Andy, you understand that you then have to change. We're not going to be able to do the budget process in the same way. I'm perfectly okay with that because I think Jess makes a very good point about it. And we can integrate that. But for example, here on work session topics 4B, discussion of discontinuance of the post-retirement medical benefit. where does that fit in the bigger planning? I think that's the kind of thing that we're trying to get a sense of what's the all over picture. We've never discussed this before. We've never had to discuss it before. So as all of these smaller sort of items are thrown in there, we don't have any context for it.
That's right.
That's why I thought having some context for that discussion or postponing that discussion until we have a context
Thank you.
would be helpful for the board. I'm sure there are other items like that that are going to come up. So the September 29th, what was the date that you just gave us for the board discussion, budget?
October 29th.
October 20, that's going to be, what date are we at now? That's after this?
Yes. This is,
Mm-hmm.
this is,
So
October 8th.
we could then discuss the operations piece, Sherry, here
Yes.
to sort of set the stage
Right.
for the bigger budget discussion on the 29th.
Yeah, I
right.
think that would make some sense, even if it's just a general outline with a couple of parameters, criteria. What is the staff thinking about? They'll have a lot more information by then.
All right, then why don't we add plan going forward 30 minutes
On October 8th?
on October 8th.
Okay,
Why don't you make it B so that it follows on the status report? Let's
I
put
agree with
like
that.
All right.
themes together.
Yeah.
We'll put it right
Yeah.
after that. All right.
Okay.
I'm sorry. What are
And
you going to call it?
plan going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Shari, I can't hear you. Shari? Sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry. If you can put operations plan going forward, that makes it a little bit more clear.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
We'll do
thank
30
you.
minutes. And we're going to cut F down to 30 minutes also, just to kind of get extra time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that change, anything else? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the work session agenda with the change? Lynn, Jess, Ginny, thank you. All right. October 22nd meeting. It's our October meeting. Give me a minute here and I'll try to bring up. Any discussion? October
move
22nd.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't know what B is on here under 6B.
I gotta see what 6B is. It's empty right now. They're just, in case
Okay.
we have another vote we need.
Oh, okay.
That's, I mean, there's nothing, it's just, we can delete it, but
Yeah,
I
let's
think it was
delete.
just left over.
Okay, let's just delete it.
Any discussion? Shari?
Angie, what items are on the tracking? What other board items have come up over the course of the last year that have not been yet addressed by the board?
I don't know right offhand. I'd have to go back and look.
Okay, because I think one of the tasks of the BOC is to make sure that we don't lose track of these items
Right.
that people have brought up,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they require some research, if they require some concrete data that we
Right.
need to ask for. We don't want to overburden the staff, so we need to have a heads up about something that's coming up. And we've had other things on the list, even from the previous year and quite frankly, from 2 years back. So I think it would be helpful if we got to see what those items are. We can continue to move.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. It just, I don't have it right in front of me.
Andy,
Yes, Jenny?
isn't the chart available on our website?
No, not yet.
Okay, never mind. Okay.
All right, any more discussion? If not, all those in favor of the agenda for the meeting? Unanimous. All right, the next one is the special work session on October 29th, which is basically devoted to the budget.
Move for approval of the October 29th agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can you pull it up? Is there an agenda?
Yeah, give me a minute.
And then I have a question on number 4. 4A.
Okay. Jenny,
Yeah, I tracked the previous agendas and it may be my fault, but I was having trouble finding where we got this information previously. Because it says straw votes. Straw votes make me a little anxious. If we're just, I guess we're just getting it and 6 days before. Now, I got a feeling that capital budget is not going to be that large. It's probably not going to take that long to look at. But, you know, I guess if we don't feel we're ready to vote on it, we don't. That's it. Okay.
right, remember, this is just the discussion, but this is the usual budget book we get, with everybody's ask.
Right.
Village says, I'd like this, the committees like this.
Actually, let me ask the question of Susan then, because this could be, we could get it sooner than the 6 days before. Susan, when do you think we would be getting some of the information in number 4?
It's on the budget calendar. Let me see.
I apologize. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have that. It's not going to be much more before that because we don't get the information from the community till the end of next week. So, and because we wouldn't get the guidelines, the parameters, like the limit to the capital budget until the end of September. So
Good point.
Before that.
Good point. Okay, so you don't know how much revenue you're going to have for sure, and how can you do a budget if you don't know that? Okay.
Now, Jess had suggested that we also add here further discussion on the operational plan going forward. And I think that would be a good idea.
Uh-huh.
Kind of the follow-up, the continuation.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. And if you're setting the context, I think that should go before number 4.
We'll make it A, then B, then C.
What is the purpose of those straw votes?
Remember, Alan, like last year,
I remember it being a very difficult process that we've had lots of trouble with. So I want to make sure we really all understand what the parameters are and what the purpose is.
right. So remember here it says straw votes will be cast by board members. It's either for or against inclusion of each item. It's basically telling staff, do you want this particular item included in their proposed budget or not?
I think it's more than that. It's telling the staff, we don't really want that period, so they're going to stop working on it. It's over, dead. They don't spend any more time on it. Or a sufficient number, and that number fluctuates depending on whether somebody abstains or they're not in the meeting, et cetera, as to how many votes it takes to be able to say to the staff, there's sufficient interest on the part of the CA board, and these are the questions we have for you to continue to work on it. That's sort of the way I interpret it.
Right, and could I,
Sure, Susan?
so it also, you would be voting in November on whether these major items, it's not the whole budget, it's just these major capital projects, any new initiatives would be included. This discussion and straw votes gives you time also to move stuff around before you vote on it in November. So that's why it just gives you an indication then to be able to.
Oh, did you
I-
To add or.
I would ju-
Oh, I didn't.
I would,
add or take things out.
I would just say that, Ginny, if you're talking to Chuck, then you're
I'm
not on
sorry.
mute. I would say that if they're votes that have consequences, then they're not straw votes.
They're preliminary votes, Alan. The actual vote is at a meeting.
Well, wait a minute. We have had a problem in the past when straw votes mysteriously turn into real votes. And I can see having kind of a straw vote just to get a sense of the meeting, a general sense. But when you put straw vote into the agenda, that really becomes a vote. And I really am very uncomfortable with that.
How would you like it worded, Nick? It is
Uh,
consensus on.
General consensus, but to me, a consensus is more than, 6-4. A consensus is, like 9 people.
Right.
I mean, it has to be pretty comprehensive.
If you remember what Janet said, Janet, you want to repeat that?
Last year, we determined that the straw vote would be an indicator and that we would all have to vote later. We could vote to remove something and it would require a majority to keep it in. So a majority of the board would have to be in favor to keep something in the budget, as opposed to years past when we had issues with the straw poll where a tie was enough to keep it in.
Right. We made that change.
Well,
Sorry.
I just I don't like straw votes. I would rather.
Can we not reinvent the wheel every year, though? Honestly, this was the compromise we made last year. It was just an indicator. If there were obviously people opposed to it, then we didn't do it. But if the majority of the board was like, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable, then later we would have the option of removing it if we've changed our minds about it.
Okay. I guess what we're looking for is a general consensus and not a strict vote.
Yeah.
And I think if the whole board seems to be moving towards something, rather than raising our hands, but if nobody's objecting, that gives direction. But to be raising our hands and counting votes, that really is not the proper venue for that.
Susan and then Shari and then Ginny. Susan?
There's some language on the agenda here that describes what the purpose or the way the votes are to be happening. Maybe that needs to be clarified. It seems like the second sentence was an attempt to describe what Janet Evans was saying, that any straw votes taken at that work session are subject to actual board votes at the meeting on the 12th. Is that, would you want to clarify that, and maybe that would help?
It's either a vote or it's not a vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's one or the other. And if we have a general agreement, a non-voting, but and maybe somebody might say, well, I kind of go along with that, but I'm worried about this. A sense of the meeting. That's one thing. But the minute you take votes, you're taking votes.
Right.
Even if you overrule them later, they're votes.
Okay, Shari and then Ginny.
Yeah, straw votes are really designed, just as Janet said, just to be indicators. It's a quicker way of getting a reading. And when we have lots and lots and lots of items to get through, that is a quick way of doing it. Now, with a straw vote, you don't necessarily have to read off every name. I think if you look in Robert's rules, you can get a quick overview. Now, because, we're doing things as Zoom, that may change how we're able to do this. But I think we need to get a preliminary sense of where the board is for the very reason that Susan was talking about. It indicates whether there's strength in an area, whether there's ambiguity, whether an item can be adapted or negotiated or modified so that it stays in or out. I don't think we want to get hung up on the vote part of it. I think the most important thing is, what do we get out of this, and what does it indicate to staff as far as what the next round is going to be? This is just going to be round one.
True.
That's all it is.
Yep.
Point of information, though. Robert's Rules of Order says straw polls not in order. A motion to take an informal straw poll to test the water is not in order because it neither adopts nor rejects the measure and hence is meaningless and dilatory.
Alan, Jenny?
Yeah, in terms of not doing that, and really you're asking the chair to kind of look around the room and get a sense, and we're all going to have a fit about that. If the chair says, yeah, I think you're all sort of for this, I mean, that'll never go over with this board. So you have to have a vote, whatever you call it, straw or otherwise. But maybe when we write it, maybe we follow what Sherry's saying is, yeah, you raise your hand, but you record it. When you record it in the minutes for X project, you would say majority of the board are in favor of moving ahead with questions about this project. Majority of the board are in favor of killing this project. As that's the way you'd write it up, as opposed to all of our names with a yes or a no. But I think you got to raise your hand or something, or Andy will go nuts with trying to interpret what your shake of the head meant or didn't mean. And we'll all just disagree with them anyway.
Well, then let's call it a vote. That's all.
But it's not, that would bother me because it is not a final vote. It is really a preliminary vote.
Well, let's call it a preliminary
And
vote.
it's in a work session where we say we don't take votes.
Could I say
Preliminary
something?
indication of whether we want this project to continue to be alive. With
So
Nancy.
could I just say something? It does then give something, or give people the opportunity to kill a measure that some people might be in favor of. So it, in essence, does become a vote if something either lives or dies by that straw poll.
But that's the idea of democracy and a majority rule of the board. If it's a project that the
Then
majority,
it's a vote. I agree, but it is a vote. It acts as a vote because it either kills or allows to live an idea that has been voted on.
yeah, but I mean, you got to be fair to staff. This is a really tight time frame. They cannot be spending time on all of these capital projects if, in fact, we're not interested in half or something.
Then we can have a vote that says the board thinks this is worth pursuing or not pursuing, and
Yeah.
call it a vote. Don't call it a straw vote. Call it a vote.
Right, it kills things. It has
How
a
about sense of the
potential.
board? Does that make sense, Dick?
As long as we understand what it is, a sense of the board is there's no strong objection. People say, well, this is something worth pursuing, but I don't like these pseudo votes. I mean, something, if you're counting noses, it's a vote.
So you're saying the motion should be, do you feel that the project X is worth pursuing?
Yeah, that would be okay.
All right, so that,
But
just
call
write
it
it
a
up,
vote. We
write
vote
it
on
up that way, or it is not worth pursuing. Write it up that way, we all vote. We don't want to use that word. But I want to reserve, and I think we all do, the right that after staff spends time pursuing and getting answers to the questions we may have raised, that we can vote against this in February.
No, well, that's all that vote would be. This would be a vote to ask the staff to pursue something. And that doesn't mean once they pursued it, we'll look at what they came up with and then we'll vote on it. But this is a preliminary vote, but it's a vote.
I was just trying to explain that in terms of Jess is new on the board, that we do have another shot at it with the final budget.
Yeah,
All right.
All right, is that good enough?
that'll do.
All right. So, all those in favor of the proposed agenda with those two changes, the sense of the board and the operational plan going forward? Ginny?
Yes, sorry.
All right, 4-0-0. All right, November, we have one combined work session board meeting for November. Give me a minute here. So the work session, it's just it's the usual stuff.
Move for approval of the work session, November 12th, 2020, and the board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
I roll.
Can I ask a question then?
Yes.
On the consent agenda for the board meeting, you have ratified straw votes taken on October 29th to include major capital projects and new operating initiatives. So I think you need to think about putting it under consent because I vote against it.
It's under board votes.
Oh. No, but mine, it says consent agenda. Oh, okay, you're separating it. I see. My page separated, sorry.
Oh, no, it's gonna be a board
I just
vote.
have a weird.
No,
Thank
it
you.
would be a definite board vote.
Okay, thank you.
My question is more, why is it on the agenda this soon when, what was the last one we were just talking about? October 29th, and this is, are the staff going to have time to get answers to our questions, and we're actually going to be able to vote November 12th? Why do we need to ratify what we did October 29th? We would be looking at this as a real vote in February when we approve the budget. I don't understand the purpose of number 5 at all.
Me neither.
No, there may be a very good purpose. I just don't understand it.
This is the process the board had used in the past.
Well, this is telling staff what you want in the draft budget. So the previous meeting on the 29th, you're giving us a sense of what you wanted to do. It gives you an opportunity to move things around. Then you say on November 12th, we want these items in the budget that you're gonna deliver to us in early January, and that we're gonna deliberate on in January and February, and ultimately vote on at the end of February. So one way or the other, if you want to, you can. I don't care when you do it, other than it not be later than November 12th. You need to tell us what you want in that draft budget, so we can calculate depreciation. We can look at the loss or gain on disposals. We can figure out the other operating costs related to these items. We can develop the full budget that you would be then deliberating on in January.
Okay, so it may be the same as what we did on the 29th, or it may change 1 or 2 projects.
It could change a half a dozen projects. It could change however many we wanted to change.
Okay.
But we're just trying to get everybody to have enough time to look at it.
Okay, so the wording needs to change in terms of our allergic reaction to straw votes.
Yeah.
Okay. But other than that, I understand the concept now. Okay.
All right, Shari?
Still not locked in, okay.
No.
But we're bloody close to it, okay.
No, you're not. You just got to give us some direction.
Yeah. No, I understand, sorry.
Yeah, Andy, why are we doing a combined work session and a meeting? Either it's a meeting at which we're going to take votes, or it's a work session to develop continuing consensus around those items that came up that were ambiguous or that we didn't have consensus, or that people wanted to negotiate different figures. So it can either be a work session or it can be a meeting. But I don't think it has to be both. For example, where capital projects and open space updates 4D, if that's the placeholder for where Dennis does his usual media presentation, we really don't need that there. We don't need to have that at this meeting. I think this should really be devoted to budget. This is the only meeting we're going to have in November. And if that's the critical thing that we're doing, then that's really what we need to be doing.
So,
And since we do separate our agendas into this is board, even our meeting agendas into this is discussion and this is for vote, we could still do that. Just have one meeting and put discussion items under discussion.
Right, we could put them under discussion. Renee?
so wasn't the reason we did this last year in case we had items that needed to go through the 3 discussion
Right.
thing? So my question is, we can leave this, I mean, theoretically a work session sitting there in case we need it, but there's really nothing on there that I see right now that would come under the 3 reading rule that you have to vote. Is that fair or is that wrong?
I agree. In fact, I would suggest that we simply take the development tracker and the capital projects and put them down in the board meeting under a discussion.
Right.
And we could have a meeting and forget about trying to, because it is really tough to try to do this work session meeting.
And so if we had something where we thought we needed it to get passed, couldn't we always take a vote
Yes,
to not have to waive the 3 reading rule? And then
Yeah.
we can just do away with the work session or the meeting, whichever one you choose?
no, we can. And
Right.
that's why I
Okay.
suggest, let's just go with a straight meeting.
Okay,
Let's put development tractor and capital projects under a discussion topic,
okay,
and then we'll just have a meeting.
that sounds great.
Jess, Lynn, what do you think?
That's fine.
Fine with me.
Is there, all right, with that change, is there, we're gonna take the vote on approving the board meeting agenda. We'll skip the work session. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right. All right. Now, we had said we were gonna talk about Janet's proposal. Janet,
Do you have to vote on the minutes, or do we do that when
no, that's
I-
already done.
what?
With consent.
I apologize. I got disconnected down there and I had to come up here. Okay. Never mind.
Janet,
I had 2 proposals, Andy. Which one are you talking about?
how about the one, for the values,
Yeah, so I think this
half day in person
yeah,
conversation?
probably goes along with the discussion of the operating budget because I think there are 2 pieces. One, talk about the values that, there are things that we have known that Columbia Association subsidizes versus makes money. But if we feel like those go along with our vision for Columbia Association, then those are something that we would want to identify and ensure are supported as well as we can, versus things that are making money, that support other things. But I think to have that conversation, we really need to understand, so for instance, we were talking about best case, worst case scenario, so say worst case scenario is our only income is annual charge. Like, what are the most basic expenses that we have regardless of what we decide in the budget? And we all have to understand what those are to even have this conversation, because, there's a certain amount of what we bring in that is non-negotiable, and then there's what's left over after that. And I think that's where we need to have the conversation, because there, are clearly decisions made on a regular basis that may or may not fall in line with what each of us believes are the values of Columbia Association. So my suggestion was that, one, we have an understanding of what those overhead expenses are that we must incur and that are non-negotiable. And then, we would all study that information ahead of this proposed meeting. And that is to talk about, what are our strategic objectives? What are the values we think, how do each of us see those values being viewed within Columbia Association? How do we support the values that the majority of us agree are things that Columbia Association should be supporting as best it can in the current financial situation? And so the only other thing I would say is that I would ask that our fellow board members with experience in facilitation help us make the most of whatever period of time we decide to have, because obviously this is a very broad conversation that will need to stay very focused in order for us to accomplish what I'm proposing.
And I would add that Dick had a good list of background information we would need.
Yeah.
Right.
Dick, if you want to say anything about the,
What I'm looking for is can be summed up as a strategy. Instead of just, picking this and picking that, we need to have an overall concept of what we are trying to do.
Right.
And so when the staff sees opportunities to save some money, they have, is this strategic or not? Is this really something? And the basic is values. What are our values? What does the community expect of us? I mean, what is the essence of CA? And so, and what can we pay for just out of the annual charge? What do we have to pay for out of the annual charge? And then, as we get into the extras, what are the critical ones?
Right.
Well, it's a strategy.
Renee, you have your,
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. I would probably tweak Dick's list a little bit. I can look at that, and we might want to just tweak it a little bit to get more specific. But I think that at this point, what really came home to me when I looked at the new budget, when we have $500,000 in salaries for outdoor pools, which is like 8 people working full time, and there's no pools open. So I think we have to really dig into the numbers to understand what the fixed cost of any program facility is. And if it's a lease or something else, what are the terms of that lease? I think we have to really, are we stuck in that lease for 10 years? That would make, have to think a different way than if the lease matures in 6 months. So I think that you guys have a really good idea, and I support it 100%.
Well, feel free to tweak. I mean, that was just something I tossed
No,
out.
it's a great start. I just think we need to be a little bit more specific because I think we need to understand, what I think is we get that information from Susan, then we need to look at, okay, what did it do historically? What is it doing now? And what do we think it'll do in 2 years? So if it's something that was profitable, but it isn't today, but it probably will be in 2 years, I think we need to think about that one way. How much of an investment will we make in it? If it's something that wasn't profitable, maybe is or isn't today, and what will it be in 5 years? Are we willing to put X number of dollars in, or do we need, my comment is we don't necessarily need to slash programs, but maybe we need to rethink how those programs work. How can we make that program more profitable? Is it by hiring somebody or bringing in someone who has expertise that we don't have today, or something else? So I don't think it's about slashing programs as much as it is about revamping the programs.
Jenny.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you're saying, Renee, except the last part where it's not slashing programs. I think everything's on the chopping block in a zero budget. So, there's no sacred cows.
No, I'm not saying there is, Jenny. I'm just saying it's not about, I'm not here just to cut. that cut, slash and burn doesn't work either. We have to
Right.
leave our community more resilient.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I'm just saying I'm giving my opinion of how I work a budget. It's zero-based budgeting. Everything's on the chopping block.
I agree, but we have to
but-
also look for opportunities.
Yeah, no, can I just finish with two more?
Absolutely, Jenny.
What I'm getting at is the other thing that I've said for 3 years now, and I feel strongly about, is we need to be looking at programs as to what is really CA's responsibility, or nobody else is doing it. What is really nice to do, but it's really should be the county doing it. In the past, maybe the county's done it and they've lost the funding, and we've taken on the entire burden. So or what should the feds be doing, or the state be doing, and why are we doing it? So we should approach some of these services programs that way as well, and be innovative about, how we will deal with that issue. Because okay, that's it.
Shari?
Or should we just not do them and let the chips fall where they may?
I think that's
Nobody
what
figured it
I think that's what I was saying. Yeah, if it's something that county was paying half and or something like that, and then they just said not important enough, and we're doing it for the whole county, then a question is why.
Right.
Shari?
And we
Yeah, I think Janet's proposal is really getting at the meaning of the programs and services. When everything is barreling along in the best of all possible times, there is sort of just through, in physics, a body in motion. So we just keep doing things because we're in motion.
Right.
But this is really an opportunity to rethink, and I like the idea of revamping and modifying and seeing how we can make things more cost effective, because there are a lot of things that have been operating for many, many years at CA that have never really been looked at, just like in the federal government. Lots of layers, lots of bureaucracy, lots of steps. Maybe we don't need a lot of those things. So that can certainly be looked at. What is unique to CA? And I think this is something else, that after 50 years, it's really a question of what makes us unique and therefore really valuable to our residents and the surrounding community. I think that's a very important question to ask too. In terms of how to organize this kind of meeting, I feel like the ancient mariner sometimes, because I'm saying, well, way back in the day, this is how we did this kind of thing. Or maybe I have an albatross around my neck. I don't know. But we used to have a half day, and sometimes it was a full day meeting, where the board would set priorities. And that's exactly what it would be. There were some programs that were up and running and didn't need a lot of attention. There were other things that really did. And through the process of discussion, there are some mechanisms that have been used with large groups to get a kind of priority setting that can be done relatively quickly. Now, how we adapt that, again, if we're in a Zoom situation, we really got to think about that. But there still might be a way of utilizing some technology here with SurveyMonkey or some of the other things where we can get some concrete data. And I think that that's really important, that setting priorities. If we can't do that, and it just doesn't work, then maybe we do have to find a physical setting where we can all be in a room, still be COVID compliant, and use some of the large meeting technology to actually do that work. So I think
there are other technologies that allow us to do that. This technology doesn't. Zoom does it well.
I think that's something we should really talk about if the board can get behind this, and I think it's a very good idea.
So Janet has proposed in her proposal to do a half-day in-person conversation. That would mean a Saturday, probably a Saturday morning. I mean, because think of it as like a 4-hour block of time. Janet, anything you want to say or?
No, I mean, ideally, I think we would try to do it in person. If that means being outside, I think that would be doable. I just think it's a little bit easier and more time effective to do it in person because the focus is there, whereas like a 3-hour Zoom meeting is pretty grueling.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jen, and I think it really has to be, this type of conversation really has to be in person so we can kind of see each other and talk. Alan?
If we use the right technology, my experience with doing diversity dialogues and some pretty heavy-duty personal conversations with groups of people online has been pretty good. I'm Mr. In person, and I'd much rather do things in person. I think it's irresponsible of us to do this in person, though. The benefits of being in person are almost totally negated by having to be at least 6 feet apart. And we can do, if we use Zoom or reasonably effective technology, we can easily do small groups. We can easily add polls. There's all kinds of things we can do that we don't do in these meetings. And I would just think it's irresponsible of us to think of this as a face-to-face meeting at this time.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Andy?
Yes, Jenny.
I'd be interested in getting a response from the board now as to how many board members would absolutely not attend an outdoor one if we were able to check with our medical director, explain the plan that we would have in mind, and see if he would approve it or make some changes to it so that it would be safe. Because there is a benefit of actually seeing your colleagues and seeing their facial expressions when they're not talking, somebody else is. You get to pick up a lot of what's really going on. It's not the same with Zoom at all. So we could also find a way that if there are just one person or two that don't want to do that, of having a call-in thing. I don't know. How many really would not attend it if we could get approval from our medical director, an outdoor meeting?
Is this a straw vote?
Yeah, it's a straw vote, very straw. I mean, is there anyone that wouldn't do that?
I would have to know where it is and how safe it is. That's an important part of it.
Sure, of course, or we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, Jenny said, check with our medical director to make sure everything works.
Right.
Renee? Renee,
You're on mute,
You're
Renee.
muted.
Renee, you're muted.
So if we're going to ask for quite a bit of information from Susan on top of all the budget stuff that's already going on, I'm not sure when she's going to be able to get that done. And that's going to become an issue for us, the timing, because if we're going to try to do it outside, I don't want to be doing it in December. I'm not doing December outside.
It
I
needs to be
thought
soon.
we had to have it more like the first Saturday in October, maybe at the latest.
That's what I'm
If it's-
thinking.
Yeah,
If
I'm
it's not
thinking like
raining or storming.
What?
first. Well,
If
maybe
it's not
we'll
raining or storming.
pick 2 dates and hope that maybe one of those works.
Well, we could do it at like Claret Hall in the ballroom, which even at 25% holds like 50 people. So if there's a dozen of us, we're pretty far. We'd all have our own big round table.
Alan?
Yeah, but I think we still want masks if we're
I would just
indoors.
like-
I would want a
Right.
mask, which then takes away the face piece.
Right.
Exactly. And as does the distance. We're all at our own table, 6, 12, 10 feet apart
Right.
at the least.
Right.
That's the closest people. And then you think of the 13th, 14th, 15th table around the place. And also, we can only get from our medical director an opinion. And we can't get an
Not a
assurance.
guarantee.
And I'd much rather be able to continue to be physically present with my grandchild than to tell my daughter and son-in-law that no, I'm going to go to a face-to-face meeting and then have them say, well, that breaks our agreement about how we are being responsible to each other so that we can be physically together.
That's something to think about.
So I get the sense from the board that we would like to have this half-day session on a Saturday, aiming somewhere first or second Saturday in October. Does that make sense? And then we're gonna have to work out the details. So why doesn't everyone go back and look at your calendars and send Janet and myself, you know, which dates work for you?
Which
And
Janet?
then we'll choose the date and then we'll work on the administrative stuff.
Do you have an
Which
idea
Janet?
what time?
Andy, can I ask if you're going to narrow it down to a couple of dates, either end of September or beginning of October? Can you just do a doodle poll rather than have to have everybody send something to you? Some people won't remember. Let's just do a doodle poll. And
All right.
my other suggestion was going to be that, again, Alan, if you would, investigate a way of doing this with technology so that we have an option. And let's look at some possible vendors. Renee mentioned Clarence Hall. There may be other places that would also be usable. So let's get two different options going here. One in person, and let's take a look at the other technology option, and then we can follow up on that.
All right, so I'll send out a doodle poll.
I don't know how many board members are signed up for the farm tour on the 26th. That's a
Oh,
Saturday.
yeah.
So you may not want to.
All right,
I don't want.
I'll pick a couple of Saturdays and we'll do a vote.
And the staff, it'd be great if we could lock it in so the staff would lock in the date anyway, and we can
Yes.
decide inside, outside, half and half, whatever.
Right.
But the date will give the staff a target. But I guess the other thing is the questions. To be fair to staff, Dick's got a list. What is our time frame in terms of adding to that list or whatever, so that we have a drop dead date when this stuff goes to Susan and her people? We just can't be dropping this 2 days before the meeting if we want. One, we need to be reading the answers too before the meeting, right?
We might be thinking about, if we think about a flow, it might be that we're actually talking two different meetings. One is a discussion that can then lead to some specific questions. And then we get those specific questions, which will hopefully be more narrow based on the discussion. And then the follow-up meeting, we can be talking more knowledgeably based on the information from the staff.
Let's do the one meeting first before we commit to two.
Yeah, I'm concerned
Well-
about that because we are going to be really, looking and listening to the public comments about some of the budgets. So I'd like to really get as much information as possible and make, use of the first meeting, at least where we get a lot of information. And we do have our questions. Now, Dick had a whole list of questions. Renee is going to add one. I think we really pretty much know what we want at this point anyway. It may wind up we need more later, but I'd like to get this moving.
How about deadline of this Thursday for questions? Dick, Renee, you are going to work together? Let me know by Thursday.
I was just gonna let Renee add whatever she wants to it.
All right. Thursday's the deadline. And then I'll pass that on. Okay, Janet, you had one other suggestion.
Yeah, the other one was for us to hold a virtual town meeting. This was a suggestion by a resident, which I think is an excellent idea. That, a lot of people are feeling like they just don't have a lot of answers. And so it would give anyone who is interested an opportunity to come and ask questions within some period of time. And, I think it probably is in our best interest to have them pre-submit questions if they have definite ones that they know they want to ask, and that way we're prepared for them. But, it shouldn't be limited to that. It should not require a 24-hour sign-up period. I think anyone who wants to be able to log on that day should be able to log on.
I think it's a good idea.
I do
And
too.
we have a new, communication marketing director, and we have a new, media person to took David's place. And this might be a good thing to run by them. 'Cause it's gonna take a lot of, forethought to put it all up. I mean, and get it all going, so. What's the
I
rest
have a
of the board?
question about what the agenda will be for that, how
Oh,
that will
yeah.
be handled.
We would have to work that out. My first question is does the board think this is a good idea?
I think it's a great idea. I just am very concerned about how it's going to be handled and who's going to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to start out initially with any of the frequently asked questions that we already have compiled. And then allow
That's
that
good.
to trigger additional questions. I don't want it to be a complete free-for-all, but you know as well as I do that it could certainly turn into that.
And I think that's good.
And I would say we put out a document with the answers to those and let people respond to the ones that, or question the ones they have further questions about. But to simply read an existing list of answers to frequently asked questions, I think is not a great use of a bunch of people's time.
You know what? Yeah, that's fine. I think as long as we are filling the need of anyone who has questions is able to ask them, I'm good. So
Shari?
Me too.
Shari?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, in terms of the meaning of this town hall, it's not really for us, to a certain extent, it's, I think the idea of starting with the FAQs is a good idea because that again sets a context. But it's really a listening session. I think it's really important. This has been so much a piece of the communication that has gone awry, is that people don't feel that they're being listened to. I'm certainly hearing that. So if we put this forward as we used to call it a listening post in my village. And we would be available at a certain time at the much beloved bagel bin.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is no more. But anybody could come in with a question. If you didn't have an answer, you said that you would follow up. Or you would refer somebody to someone else in the community. And Ginny, this is your point about things that are the county's responsibility. So many of the questions that I've gotten are really about things that the county does. So
Yep.
this is another great opportunity to really make that point clear.
Mm-hmm.
So can we call it something, I don't know, maybe other than a town hall? A listening post, a listening session, I don't know, come up with something a bit more creative than that. But that's, I think that would be a really good idea. And then Alan's point about having a plan for follow-up. I think that's really, really important. People need to know that action is going to be taken. Not just one-way communication, but you have to have that feedback loop. Some action has to be taken as a follow-up to that meeting.
All right, here's what I suggest is if Janet and Shari could kind of work together and flesh out the proposal and then get back to us. I think the board wants to go ahead with this, but it sounds like we need a little bit more discussion and we need a little bit more clarification. Janet, is that acceptable?
yeah, that works.
Shari, you can work with her? And anybody else who wants to chime in?
Yeah, sure. And I'd certainly, Alan, I'd love to know what kind of technology you've used in the past successfully. I've been in a couple of big community meetings. And so I have some ideas about what I've seen that works or maybe doesn't work as well, but that would be great.
Okay, let's go on. Talking points, Janet.
Before you move on to talking points, Andy, and I'm probably maybe on an island here, but I want to go back to the previous thing we talked about this list of questions for the Saturday meeting. I'm concerned that this ends up being another neighborhood center thing where we have these questions that are sort of divorced from any sense of focus, and then we end up with a bunch of data, but we don't have any way to really deal with it. We end up dealing piecemeal with pieces of things rather than holistically. And so I'll just renew my suggestion that I think we'd be better off having a discussion where we first really come to some agreement about how we're framing the issues we want to talk about. That will lead us to what data we need. That will lessen what the staff needs to come up with. And then we can be more focused when we finally come up with the discussion. By trying to force it into one meeting, we will be forced to deal with whatever data we have at that moment.
All right, I don't hear any feedback.
Well, I think that Alan has some really good points there. I guess, and I like the idea of doing a Saturday meeting, and I think if we could come with a good list to start with, we could get started on that, on whatever items are on that list. But there are going to be things that we don't have all the answers to, or we don't have sufficient information, or we have other questions. And I guess what I'm wondering is there any way we could take, if there's only a couple of items, put them into one of the other meetings, or if there's enough questions, as Alan is alluding to, that we might have to have a second meeting. And I certainly would be in favor of doing that, because I think it would give Susan more direction than she's had in prior years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but let's, this
Yeah,
Thursday, put the questions out, and you
Yeah.
can see, and from there, we can see where we go, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, Renee. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. I think we just have to start with the first meeting and kind of get over that.
Yeah,
I want as much information as possible, as quickly as possible, to be able to make decisions, even if we have to keep meeting on it. But let's get a lot out of this first meeting, is the way I look at it.
all right, talking points, Janet.
Wait, Shari has a question.
Oh, sorry. Shari?
I was just going to ask some of the data on particular programs and services that we're looking for. There are coordinators, program coordinators. So for example, where the question about aquatics is concerned, the people who actually manage the pools, and I'm talking about the second, maybe the second level down of coordinators and managers, might have a lot of information at their fingertips that we would be able to pull. For example, how did things run last year and the year before? Our village has invited people in over the years to talk about exactly those kinds of things. Can we pull from some additional people, maybe even have them brief the board, even if we have to do a half hour or an hour pre-meeting? This is, I mean, we've always done data in a particular way, but we're under a different kind of crunch situation this time. So let's use all the people that we have at CA that have a lot of valuable information.
Jess?
I feel like we're kind of getting in the weeds here, and we're now like 40 minutes past when the meeting was supposed to end.
Mm-hmm.
So, can some of these discussions about what exactly is going to be in that half-day session or multiple, can some of that be tabled until we have a date?
Okay. I mean,
I mean, that would be my suggestion. I'm starting to kind of, fade here. So I'd like to try to finish up the BOC meeting and then, of course, make plans to schedule this closed session that people seem to want and then call it a night.
All right, let's just
Okay.
get the talking points done.
Yeah.
Janet?
Perfect.
I'll go as quickly as I can. The BOC approved the amended agenda for the September 10th, 2020 board work session. The BOC approved the amended September 24th agenda, the amended agenda for the September 24th board meeting. The BOC approved the amended agenda for the October 8th, 2020 board work session. The BOC approved the agenda for the October 22nd, 2020 board meeting as presented. Item B under number 6 will be deleted. The BOC approved the amended agenda for the October 29th, 2020 budget work session. And the BOC approved the deletion of the board work session on November 12th, and will take those work session topics and add them to the proposed board meeting agenda. Therefore, on October 12th, there will only be a meeting, a board meeting that evening. And the board moved forward to implement the suggestions from Janet Evans regarding the values conversation and the virtual town hall meeting.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna adjourn the BOC meeting. So 9:06. All right. Closed work session.
Okay,
I can
excuse
do
me,
2 or 3 things. Yes, Janet?
Andy? Okay, it's Janet, and I apologize for interrupting. What I would like to do, since the board is going into a closed work session, I would like to turn off the camera and the speaker here in the conference room.
Yeah.
I am at CA headquarters, so I want to turn everything off here. I want to also ask Sam, who is also here at headquarters with me, to stop recording at this point, and then I'm going up to